Good afternoon, Lewy Warriors. It's another episode of CLBDI Talks with your host, Joe. I'm here today with a member of our advisory board and Pastor David Malina. David, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here and good to have this time to talk.
I'm very much looking forward to speaking with you about faith and support and your experience with CLBDI. But before we start, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about you?
I've been a pastor in the Eastern Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada, and I'm serving the community, the faith community of Christ Lutheran Church in Waterloo already for it's coming up to 8 years. Christ Lutheran Church. So I've been a pastor and I have family here in Kitchener, and life is here in the Waterloo region.
Well, we are so glad to have you here today, as I previously said, and you sit on the advisory team for CLBDI, for which we are very grateful. But I wanted to know what brought you to be a part of this project, and what has your experience been like with CLBDI? What do you feel like we're doing, and what drew you to it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so the two things, when I came to Christ Lutheran Church in 2016, I got to know Carol and Bob. Both of them had been members of the church for some time prior to my arrival. So I got to know Carol. I also got to know Bob when he was already experiencing, the symptoms of his dementia, and he was still coming to church with Carol. He was still even reading the scripture passages once or twice, I remember, with some difficulty, and with Carol by his side, helping and that sort of thing. So I think me and the community of Christ Church got to, we're journeying along with Carol and Bob through their path with dementia. So I got to know Carol, and then after Bob passed away in 2020, February 2020, Carol, of course, began working with you, Joe, and because of my experience with Carol, as well my personal experience with my dad, who suffered from dementia. He had whole cluster of forms of dementia. Was found out the frontal temporal, the Alzheimer's, the Lewy body, the vascular dementia. He suffered from all of that sort of combination for about 15 years until he passed away in 2019 at age 80. And so I had a real personal encounter journey with my dad and what it meant having a loved one suffer with the disease. And so those two things really drew me to accepting the invitation from Carol to join her on the advisory committee for CLBDI. And since then, it's been a good experience getting to know you, Joe, and others, and just learning about what it means to make the reality of dementia, Lewy body dementia, something more familiar with the public, with the common public, to take the stigma out of it, to take the mystery out of it, and just have it more out there as a known disease that people suffer with.
Well, we are so glad to have you as a part of our advisory team, our advisory board. And I'm so glad you brought up community, because community support is so important to LBD patients and their families. We wanted to have you on here because many people find support through faith-based initiatives and their church. Even people who maybe not are outwardly religious or churchgoers have access to a wide variety of kind of church-based support systems in their community, as churches become kind of have been known to be kind of pillars of community and offering help. What role do you see not only faith, but just the church in general having in building a support system for people who need it?
Great question. This is the thing. One of the beautiful things about churches is is the opportunity for people to have a safe space, kind of a non-judgmental space to create and form relationships, but relationships over the long term, right? I mean, it's not just a short-term kind of encounter with the church, but people who are part of churches, typically who stick with it, are there for the long term, and they get to know each other. They get to know their families. We all get to know a little more about each other at a deeper level, beyond sort of some of the small talk. How's the weather doing? And that we get to know each other, and it's over the long term. And so that's the best of the church can be when churches offer that non-judgmental, safe space for people to be and to get to know each other, to become friends, really, friends over the long term. And so when things like disease or the hard stuff of life happen, when folks are part of the faith community, they can readily find those places of support through friendship. And churches, I mean, the other thing about churches is that there's a faith tradition that comes with the church, and the faith tradition of the Christian church has a wonderful fundamental basis in the Christ tradition, where Jesus was someone who always identified with those who are vulnerable and suffering. And so when we learn about the scriptures, when we learn the stories of Jesus, when we delve into that in our worship and study and book clubs and other things, we really were schooled in the school of love, in the love that Jesus showed, as identifying with the vulnerable. So churches provide, in my mind, that kind of the why, why we do what we do, why we extend ourselves in care and compassion to others. It provides the sort of a theoretical, intellectual, but also the heart motivations for loving in those sacred scriptures. Like, yeah. And so as a member of the church and as a faith follower or Jesus follower, we're challenged to learn more about, and maybe you know go to the edge of what we're maybe comfortable with, and in forming relationships with people. And people with dementia, my goodness, there's so much to learn about how to love and care for someone who suffers with dementia. There's so much self-awareness and learning we have to do, and how we love in a way that's helpful for the other. Anyway, that's how I would initially answer that question.
And I think it's a great answer. I think one of the things that people who are going through an LBD journey or a dementia journey, whether it's themselves or loved ones, isolation is a very real worry. When you're a caretaker and your life is taken up with taking care of other people, it's very easy to forget to reach out for that support, or to feel like that support isn't there. And having a community,
Yeah,
be it faith-based or otherwise, of people that can support you, and can help carry that burden, whether it's through just being there, or going out for lunch, or being a part of a church meeting after mass, or whatever.
exactly.
There's such a necessity for that, and there's a real ease of caretakers not realizing that community fades away when you become so isolated. So I think it's a great option for people who are spiritual or religious, and a good idea to reach out to your church. Or even if you're someone who's maybe not a church going person, here in Waterloo, we have a lot of um, religious institutions and religious paths that are very interested in helping people. Your church, the Mennonite churches, across the board, there are these kind of options for people who are looking and maybe don't realize that they're there. So, what I wanted to ask you next is, are there ways someone's church can be a source of support that some people might not know about? Are there any little known initiatives in the region that people can find that might help them? You know?
Mhm. Yeah, it's we have folks in our church that are incredibly caring. Like from the sort of smallest thing regarding a phone call, just a regular check-in phone call. We have folks who do that, and so from anywhere from doing something as simple as that to the groups that we have at our church, that many churches have similar groups, like with a men's breakfast that meets once a month. 15, 20 guys come out, and not only members of the church but their friends or neighbors come out to just create that space for conversation and connection. We have what's called a Sophia Circle. Some women get together to talk about their journey, and not all of it easy stuff. And so that group gets together. We have the prayer shawl group, a knitting group. You know, all of those group things happen almost organically, naturally, when folks come together in a church to they typically people will join a church because they maybe have those questions, those spiritual questions, the spiritual hunger or something niggling at them. They want to find out more. They come to Sunday morning worship, but then out of that Sunday morning worship and liturgy spawns these other social supportive groups that happen typically in faith communities like at Christ Waterloo. And so it's in those supportive context places that people or family members with dementia can find that needed support and chip away at the loneliness that's the big problem in our society. That's lack of sense of belonging, or that loneliness that's an issue that even our region has identified in the quality reports that they've put out in years past. The sense of need of belonging to chip away at the loneliness. So faith communities play a really, really important role in providing that opportunity where people can feel like they belong somewhere, and that sense of care, the mutual care that comes along with that. Yeah.
Well, and I think that one of the things too that I just wanted to touch on and get your thoughts on that kind of just came to me now as you were speaking is the other aspect that we're not touching on is guidance.
Yeah.
Going through a journey like you do having a loved one with LBD or being diagnosed with dementia, um, it can bring up a lot of big questions about
Mhm.
a life lived, what comes next, you know,
Mhm.
and people search for guidance in those moments. And I think one of the things that a kind of church community can give, or someone like yourself can speak with those people
Mhm. Yeah.
and give them some sense of, if not comfort, some guidance, some light, a beacon
Yeah.
of thinking that might ease or alleviate some of the stressors of the great unknowns that come with not just LBD but life itself, right?
Well, exactly. Oh, Joe, well said. Well, I think anywhere from the spiritual guidance to sort of the common wisdom guidance, like spiritual guidance, the scriptures, they talk about how Jesus, if whatever you do to the least of these in Matthew chapter 25, whatever you do to the least of these, the most vulnerable, you do to me. So in fact, Jesus so identifies so closely with those of us, those who are weak and vulnerable. So even when we help or befriend or accompany our dad who's suffering with dementia, it's like we are in the presence of the divine. Those kinds of spiritual mystical teachings that help us see another person as a beautiful child of God, or a person filled with the divine, helps with that loving connection. So anywhere from that spiritual teaching based out of the scriptures, love God, love neighbor, Luke chapter 10, you shall love your God and you shall love your neighbor as yourself, that trinity of love, like So loving God means loving my neighbor, like, okay, so that kind of comes together. But also, I have learned so much from some of the resources, the books from CLBDI, some of the resources there, but from others, where uh, you learn about what interactions are most beneficial. Like, we live in a very cognitive based society where everything's very rational. We value people for their ability to think clearly and rationally, and express themselves, articulate themselves in a wow kind of way. We're amazed at how people talk and write and think. And so we value the cognitive to such an extent that I think that we then have to struggle with, well, what happens when you lose your cognitive abilities? What are these people less valued? No. And so there's that embrace and love of those who may not be cognitively strong but are still beautiful people that you can laugh with, and be silly with and goofy with, and point out some things that that doesn't remind them of what they can't do anymore, but reminds them that they have interests and passions and observations that are worthy of mention. To laugh with my, laugh with my dad, or with someone who has Lewy body or dementia, to be silly with them, and like someone once told me, it's not so much what you say to them, but how you say it, the feeling, the residue feeling that you leave from a conversation. That's what matters, and that's what people with suffering from dementia appreciate. That feeling, that residue feeling of positive happiness and joy that you leave after a conversation. Not exactly, what you said or the intelligence of substance of what you said. That doesn't matter. It's more about that kind of the feeling that you leave. See, those kinds of wisdom pieces then can be talked about in faith communities, so we can teach each other and help each other be better caregivers. Those group opportunities that are there in the faith communities, that's a benefit.
Very well put. For our last question, before we close things out, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what CLBDI has been doing. And, you've hosted Carol at your church more than once to speak about CLBDI and her and Bob's Lewy journey. Can you tell us what that was like? Maybe the feedback from your congregation. Did people enjoy it? Do you want to just kind of give us a summary from your side of things?
Yeah. Carol, as some of you may know, is a dynamic, energetic, engaging speaker. She will speak well, and she has at the times that she has spoken at some of our events over the last year or two. And people have appreciated the upfront talk around her experience, but also around the reality of Lewy body dementia. They appreciate that because it's a reality that many people are affected by, if not by their own, in their own family of origin and friends of people they know. So it's a reality, and I think people are searching not only to understand dementia better from a scientific point of view, but also how to relate, how to keep those relationships with people with dementia alive and well. And so people are searching for that. And so I'm sure Carol would be more than happy to entertain possibilities of speaking in other faith communities and church gatherings. So yeah, if there's anyone listening who's thinking of having Carol come and bring a presentation, then connect with us, and Carol will be happy, I'm sure, to do that.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the CLBDI Talks interview series. It was an absolute pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for giving your perspective as a kind of faith worker and head of a faith community. It's something that have, we've thought about having someone on to speak about it. And after speaking with you when we went on our last walk. And before then, you're just such a personable person, and you speak really well and represent your faith very well. And I think that it's a major part of people's lives. And people don't often think about, faith and caretaking, but there is a connection there. And there are plenty of people who are probably looking for ways to marry the two.
Yeah.
Because faith is so important to so many people's lives. So it was so great to have you
Yeah.
on here, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Joe. Always a pleasure. Take
All
care.
right, take care.
Bye bye.